kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. At least 16 files disappear from the US Justice Department's public webpage, hosting records related to late financier Jeffrey Epstein less than a day after they were released, including one containing a photograph showing President Donald Trump. Democrats note a photo of Trump apparently removed from Department of Justice release of Epstein files. The missing files, which were available on Friday but no longer accessible by Saturday, included a photograph of Trump alongside Epstein, Melania Trump, and Epstein's longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was not sure of a Ukraine-US-Russia meeting if it will help. Says only US can persuade Russia to end the Ukraine war, as US offers new talks format including Russia and Ukraine. The United States intercepts an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in international waters, a move that comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela. Australian Prime Minister orders review into police and intelligence agencies after Bondi attack as Sydney residents honour Bondi victims on National Day of Reflection. The renewed fighting between the Southeast Asian neighbours this month, including with tanks, drones and artillery, has killed at least 22 people in Thailand and 19 in Cambodia, according to officials. After Google, Apple has issued an internal warning advising some of its employees on work visas not to travel outside the United States, as prolonged delays at US embassies and consulates risk leaving workers stranded abroad. Google has announced that its Gemini AI platform will fully replace Google Assistant on Android devices in 2026, pushing back its earlier timeline to allow for a more seamless migration. The change will affect Android phones, tablets, and even the standalone iOS app, which will be phased out once Gemini takes over. And viewers, let's start with the top story. We're getting in some updates in connection to the peace talks for Russia-Ukraine war. Now, US negotiators have met Russian officials in Florida on December 20th for the latest round of talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine, as US President Donald Trump's administration tries to coax an agreement out of both sides to end the conflict. The Miami meeting follows US talks on December 19 with Ukrainian and European officials, the latest discussions of a peace plan that has sparked some hope of a resolution to the conflict that began in 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev has told reporters after meeting US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner that the talks were constructive and would continue today as well. Let's listen in.
Дискуссии проходят конструктивно, начались и продолжатся сегодня, и также продолжатся завтра. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо.
Все.
And joining me in this discussion is Professor Wesleyan Popovsky, who is teaching at the Jindal Global Law School. He's the Vice Dean there, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us in this discussion. Professor, now the US has mooted for direct talks between Russia and Ukraine in the latest round of talks that are going to be held at Miami just in some time. Do you think that is a plan that could yield the results that is intended?
I don't think so. It's not new. There were those suggestions all the time over the last 11 months. They produced very little. There were direct talks in Istanbul, if we remember back in the summer and before that several times, but all they produced was exchange of prisoners of war, which is a minimal kind of negotiations, and it always happens in every war. And that's all that the Russians and Ukrainians directly between them could agree with. So I don't expect much this time. it's another round of the same useless negotiations. Dmitriev will tell the Americans that Russia will offer economic benefits, access to the Arctic. They can offer half of the Siberia to the Americans to please Donald Trump. That means nothing, zero. Because these people, Witkov, Kushner on one side, Dmitriev on another side, are corrupted officials. They love money. They will give each other some chocolate, some gifts, some caviar, some paintings, whatever, but that means nothing for the people in Ukraine who die and suffer every day. So another useless, I would even not watch what they will tell tomorrow. This is a useless round of negotiations until the administration in Washington realizes that together with the Europeans and with the Ukrainians, they need to be serious. They need to put real pressure on Russia to accept to a ceasefire first and foremost. And during that ceasefire, effectively, these were the previous, the initial stand of Donald Trump administration was ceasefire, either 30 days or unlimited as Ukrainian. And after the meeting in Anchorage in Alaska, Donald Trump dropped that. He get corrupted. He wants presents from Putin. He wants money. And the same, Putin expects Americans to give him something, mostly Donbass, and no security for Ukraine. And that's why for the last 7-8 months, we go around with zero progress. The full blame goes to incompetent corrupted Trump administration, and obviously to the aggressor and war criminal Vladimir.
Professor, then what's really going to push Russia to come at some kind of consensus? The sanctions threat alone has not worked. European Union's push has not worked.
Well,
will Russia stop unless its maximalist demands are met? Because it's not ready to budge at all on any demand, not ready to concede anything.
Well, it will work if there are global sanctions, not only European. If everybody in the world stop trading with Russia, including India, including China, including all the global south.
But how likely is that? Do you think India, China?
That's unlikely because they don't do it. But if you ask me what will work against Russia is global sanctions, like they did work against Saddam Hussein when all the countries in the world imposed sanctions against Saddam Hussein in 1990 when he invaded Kuwait. Only that will change the equation here, because if half of the world continues to buy Russian oil and gas, Putin will have the money to buy weapons from Iran, from North Korea, buy soldiers even from North Korea, and continue the war. Global sanctions on Russia is the solution here. Again, unlikely because of the governments in Beijing, in Delhi, and in the global south. I'm very direct here. Europeans do what they can do for the last 4 years. Americans I already discussed, and I don't want to discuss anymore Donald Trump. That's what will change the equation. I'm answering your question.
Right, sure. But for that to happen, some other nations would probably have to sell oil, gas to these importing nations at a much lower rate. Only then would they shift away from buying from Russia to, some better negotiators.
Everybody needs to pay the price. My country, Bulgaria, stopped buying Russian oil and gas. The first winter was not easy. However, we survived. Nobody died. There was enough electricity. There was enough oil and gas from elsewhere. There are many suppliers of oil and gas. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Venezuela. You have many supplies you can buy from. You don't need, and even less, you need to then re-export the Russian oil and gas. Why they do that, I have no idea. So basically global sanctions on buying Russian oil and gas.
All right, sure.
We'd have ended this war by now.
Okay. Well, thank you for your opinion, but do continue to stay on with us, Professor. We now move on, viewers, to give you some more information coming in. Russian forces have repeatedly struck a key bridge on the Dnipro River in southern Ukraine. Ukrainian officials say the bridge near the village of Mayaki was hit at least 5 times since Thursday. President Zelensky says Russia is trying to cut Ukraine from the Black Sea. The attack followed intensified airstrikes on ports, energy sites and transport routes in the Odessa region. The damaged bridge is the main western route to Moldova. Officials say it carries about 40% of Ukraine's fuel supplies. The bridge is now out of service. Let's track some news in connection to the Epstein files that have been made public on the U.S. Department of Justice website. With the release of the first batch of Epstein files, the late sex offender's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell's background has been highlighted again. Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine, was a powerful British media tycoon who was long suspected of working with Israel intelligence Mossad. Multiple journalists, former intelligence officials and whistleblowers alleged that Maxwell acted as a conduit between Mossad and Western political and business elites. Central to these claims was a Promise software scandal in which a US government program was allegedly modified with an Israeli backdoor and sold worldwide, allowing intelligence access to sensitive systems. Former Israeli spy Ari Ben Menash claimed Maxwell was the key international salesman of this technology. British intelligence reportedly viewed him as a double or even triple agent with links to Mossad, MI6 and the KGB. While never officially proven, Maxwell received a state funeral in Israel attended by senior intelligence figures, further fueling suspicions about his covert role. And moving on, viewers, the United States military has been seen operating in Puerto Rico with the U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster III aircraft taking off from the Mercedita Airport in Ponce. Separately, a U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyer, the USS Thomas Hudner, departed from the Port of the Americas on Puerto Rico's southern coast. This comes as U.S. forces interdicted and seized a second oil tanker identified as the Panama flagged Centuries in international waters off the coast of Venezuela. Meanwhile, Argentina's President Javier Milei has praised U.S. President Donald Trump's pressure campaign on Venezuela and to free the Venezuelan people. Let's listen in to what Javier Milei had to say.
Consigo. La Argentina saluda la presión de los Estados Unidos y Donald Trump para liberar al pueblo venezolano. El tiempo de tener un acercamiento tímido en esta materia.
All right, I now request Professor Popovsky to join us back in the discussion here. Professor, thank you for continuing to stay with us. We're learning, we're seeing time and again how Trump is trying to build up, his forces in the Caribbean to tackle Venezuela and Maduro specifically. But do you think the key challenge in countering Trump in the Caribbean is the fissure that is among the Latin American nations? While Brazil is warning Trump against, over his actions on Venezuela, we see Argentina now taking the Trump side.
You're right. It's a very complex situation. And it's really interesting also from the point of international law, because those acts to seize oil tankers are illegal in international law. Countries should know that. The explanation given by the Trump administration is that they try to prevent the funding of terrorist activities coming from Venezuela, very vague and not consistent as such. And here comes the opinions. They are divided, as you correctly pointed. Some countries are against the United States' robust military actions in the Caribbean, but some countries prefer to see those as a way to put pressure on the president of Venezuela, Maduro, to accept some changes, including to democracy, because he's obviously a dictator, obviously somebody who doesn't respect the rule of law, human rights, democracy, and all of that. But to remove a dictator like Maduro, the action should also be with compliance with international law. So somehow here both sides have some points to say. Those who support the US actions, that they are aimed at the removal of a dictator. On the other hand, those actions should also be, as I said, in compliance with international law. They should not violate law when you try to do something. You may try to do something good, but not with the methods that are illegal.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us and speaking to us this morning and taking part in this discussion. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move on to news now coming in from Australia, where Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has ordered a review into the police and intelligence services, where his government would try to examine whether or not these services are properly equipped in terms of structure and arrangements to ensure complete safety to its citizens. This comes in the aftermath of a brutal mass shooting that happened last week on December 14 during a Hanukkah celebration at Sydney's Bondi Beach. A father-son duo, allegedly inspired by the Islamic State ideology, has carried out the shooting, killing 15 people and wounding dozens others. According to official reports, one of the shooters, the son identified as 24-year-old Naveed, who was investigated back in 2019 over radicalization charges, but was released shortly, as authorities claimed he did not pose a threat. His father, 50-year-old Sajid Akram, who was the other shooter, was also questioned by the intelligence service at that time. Later, he still managed to obtain a gun license, which allowed him to own 6 rifles. The Australian Prime Minister has raised alarm over these security lapses in the country's intelligence services. Meanwhile, residents of Sydney gathered earlier today to collectively commemorate the tragic incident, lighting candles and marking a day of reflection to honor the people who lost their lives last Sunday. And Satoru Nagao, who is a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo now. Thank you, Mr. Nagao, for joining us this morning here at Newsx World. Mr. Nagao, now crucial concerns coming out of Australia, and something that everyone everywhere in the world was possibly thinking. How did this intel failure happen that led to the attack at Bondi Beach? Now, Australian Prime Minister has ordered the review, and crucial, the notes that have, the details that have emerged in the investigation, the fact that the young shooter, the son, was already, held in 2019 on radicalization claims, and his father was also questioned, but he still went on to procure 6 gun, rifles. So clearly a lack of intel is evident. Do you think the order that now Albanese has issued is a little too late?
Yes, about this terrorism, of course it is too late. But to prevent another terrorism, this is not too late. So that's why Albanese focusing on this is logical. But indeed, on surface, the general perception is Australia's rule to possess restriction possess gun, or Australia's intelligence service checking are not so weak. So that's why generally it is not easy to conduct such kind of terrorism. But it has happened. So from this, general perception is true, I believe, but at the same time there are some weak points that is also true. So that's why how to prevent is matter. And in this case, IS terrorism is, of course, there are 2 types. One type is, of course, organized, planned terrorism,
Right.
and another one is more individual terrorism. Individually, they are affected by IS and try to cooperate voluntarily. That in this case, how to prevent is more difficult because the individual can hide information related with the terrorism more easier. So that's why it has happened, I think. But anyway, they failed to deter this situation. So that's why they need to strengthen, they need to recheck the checking process, and they need to prevent another terrorism that is very important for Australia.
But Mr. Nagao, it's difficult to digest the fact that a superpower like Australia would lack the adequate number of personnel in intel and police services, the police forces. If that could not be the case, do you think it's also possible for a snitch, that this attack could go on without it coming to the notice of the intelligence?
It is a little bit difficult to say Australia is a superpower in this case because the size of the continent is big, but the population is only 20 million. So that's why India is 1.5 billion. Australia is 20 million, and it's completely different size. So that's why the number of the intelligence services is also limited, and so their capability is also limited. For example, one of the examples is if you stay in Australia and try to use the train, indeed their system is not a regular checking of the ticket. So the patrol has happened, and suddenly they found someone who rides a train freely. In this case, they impose a penalty. That is a system to check the ticket. So, view from this, Australia's government cannot check the people's move, especially the detail of the people's move, very difficult because of the size of the government, because of the size of the police or other public servants. So it is, but Australia is a country of the immigration. Many people coming to Australia. So that's why how to prevent is, of course, they also rely on the cooperation of the other Western countries or the other partner, including India. And so that's why this is needed. But anyway, this time they failed to prevent is true. And general perception is also true that they try to do, at least on surface, their system was relatively strong. But anyway, they failed this time, so that's why they need to recheck the total process of the checking the perpetrator, how to prevent. Maybe they need to reform it. It is clearly true.
All right. Thank you for your opinion there, Mr. Nagao, but do continue to stay on with us as we track some news now from Southeast Asia. Viewers, more than 500,000 people in Cambodia have been forced from their homes after 2 weeks of deadly border clashes with Thailand. Cambodia's Interior Ministry says over 518,000 people, including women and children, have fled artillery fire, rockets and airstrikes, including attacks by the Thai F-16 jets. Thailand says nearly 400,000 of its people have also been displaced. At least 22 people have been killed in Thailand and 19 in Cambodia. The fighting involves tanks, drones and heavy artillery. It centers on a long-running territorial dispute along their 817-kilometer border and ancient temple sites. Both sides blame each other for targeting civilians. Global powers and the United Nations are urging a ceasefire. Let's now invite Mr. Nagao to join us back in the discussion here. Mr. Nagao, what do you think is going to help impose the ceasefire? What really are the sides asking to not violate the ceasefire that was brokered by Trump?
Yes. We need to remember the one fact, in case of the military
Prowess
than Cambodia. Thailand has the Air Force, Thailand has the Navy, but Cambodia does not have the, so they only have the army and with some anti-air weapons. So that's why if Cambodia repeatedly provokes Thailand, in this case, view from Thailand, it is, so now is the time to punish them because they have the military option. And Cambodia does not have, but that is a perception that Thailand has. So in this case, the first time they restrain, but the second time, okay, more we release the military power, the Thailand start to think. and start to punish and bomb until the Cambodia apologize and completely surrender. Thailand continue to bomb and punish them. Something. This is the mood in this place just now, I think. So in this case, how to make ceasefire again is that a little bit difficult compared with the first time. First time is both the U.S. and China involved in this July this year. It has happened, but after that, in October. Of course, it is clear that there is a U.S.-China competition, and President Trump arranged this ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia, but there was no Chinese presence in that place. So Chinese side want to complain, and the Chinese side is, of course, the support of the Cambodia. So that's why if Cambodia provoke this, there is a possibility China has a reason to support Cambodia. So now Cambodia's move, Cambodia is militarily they are weak, but because of their support, Cambodia can ask China to help. So there's a possibility that China will show the presence, and without China's involvement, it is difficult to commit ceasefire.
Okay.
So U.S. start to understand that they include China, and this time try to arrange it. So now situation rely on when the Thailand satisfy their punishment against Cambodia, and if Thailand satisfied, of course, because of both U.S. and China involved, there is a possibility ceasefire will come.
But China will need to then strike a very delicate balance, because it can't even afford to upset Thailand, given the trade that it has with that nation.
Of course, China can do that, but at the same time, the view from China want to get not only Cambodia but also the Thailand, because Thailand rely on their economy by accepting many foreign tourists, and in this case, Chinese foreign tourists are very important income for Thailand. And Thailand cooperate with China a lot too, even if the Thailand is former ally of the United States. So that's why Thailand has already got the mind or power of the Cambodia, but China hasn't got mind of the Thailand. So if view from China, by using this chance, they want to expand influence not only the Cambodia but also Thailand. It's maybe their national interest. So of course the US side want to prevent such kind of situation. So this is the US-China competition of their influence in Southeast Asia. The Thailand and the Cambodia, of course both the US and China want to get, but at the same time currently Thailand is US, Cambodia is China, and how to expand their influence to the other side is a game of the diplomacy, I think.
All right. Well, that's all the time that I have for in the discussion. But thank you, Mr. Nagao, for joining us. And moving on, viewers, as always, let's track some science and technology news before we end the bulletin. NASA has announced the crew for its SpaceX Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station. The launch is set for February next year. The mission brings together astronauts from NASA, the European Space Agency, and Russia's Roscosmos. NASA astronaut Jessica Meir will command the mission on her second space flight. She is joined by first-time flyer and US Navy Commander Jack Hathaway. ESA astronaut Sophie Idnot will also make her first trip to space. Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev returns for his second long-duration stay on the International Space Station. Crew 12 will carry out science and technology tests critical for future missions to the Moon and Mars under NASA's Artemis program. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more world news.